Okay, live stream is up. Sergeants, will you begin your recordings?
PC recording started.
Cloud recording has started. Okay, good morning and welcome to today's New York City Council hearing on landmarks, public sightings, and dispositions. At this time, will all panelists please turn on your videos for verification purposes? To minimize disruption, can you please place electronic devices on silent or on vibrate mode? If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you, Chair. You may begin.
Good morning. I'm Councilmember Farah Lewis, Chair of the Subcommittee on Landmarks, Public Sightings, and Dispositions. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Council Members De La Rosa, Marte, Vernikoff, and Majority Leader Powers. Today, we will hear an application for the disposition of city-owned property to the MTA for the extension of the 2nd Avenue subway. But first, we will vote to approve LU's numbers 18 and 19 for the New Providence development, which we heard at our meeting on March 3rd. LU 18 is an application submitted by the Department of Housing and Preservation and Development and the Department of Homeless Services pursuant to sections 197-C of the New York City Charter, requesting approval of public siting to modify a restriction, limiting the capacity of a shelter facility. LU 19 is an application submitted pursuant to Article 16 of the General Municipal Law and Section 197-C of the New York City Charter for the designation of an urban development action area, approval of an urban development action area project for such area, and the disposition of such property to a developer to be selected by HPD. These applications would facilitate the construction of a development containing approximately 171 shelter beds and 130 supportive and affordable housing units located at 215-225 East 45th Street in Manhattan Council District, represented by Majority Leader Powers. We have been joined by Majority Leader Powers, who I now recognize.
Thank you, Chair Lewis, and nice to see all the members of the committee here today. Today we're voting on a project, or you are voting on a project, I should say, the New Providence Shelter in my district. It's located at 225 East 45th Street in East Midtown. It's a city-owned property, and as such is a joint application from the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development and the New York City Department of Homeless Services. The New Providence Shelter has been in existence serving shelter residents since 1997. It's currently a 130 bed shelter for homeless women. And this actual project will combine 2 old building layouts into a more modern and efficiently designed shelter that's also able to serve now an increased number of 171 single adult women, while also creating 130 new supportive and affordable housing units in Midtown. There's a lot of pieces of this, including a green roof terrace for the shelter and supportive housing residents, and a new Article 28 medical clinic, which will not serve just the residents of the building, but also be available to members of the community. We're also working, and hopefully we'll have a resolution to some improvements to the surrounding community as a result of this as well, including some improvements to the nearby Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, which is widely used by the community and the international community, as it's right across from the United Nations, completing much delayed capital projects there, putting in additional safety measures at the park at the request of the residents, and doing other measures around there to make sure that we have a good and thriving park for the long term. The community board here, Community Board 6, has been supportive of this project and the shelter, and we're excited to see the expansion and continued work in the community. And of course, being able to deliver affordable housing in East Midtown is a major accomplishment. And I'm proud to be working with the administration to help get this project done. So I want to thank everyone here today for giving it your consideration, and hope you'll support it as well. I think it's really needed at this time in the city. And it's, I think, sometimes rare we have the community and the community board come forward and support a project. But I think it speaks a lot to this specific project and the work that's been done to embed themselves into the community. So with that, I do support this project and hope you will as well. And I want to thank the applicant, the chair, of course, and all my colleagues here today for everything you're doing, and hope you'll vote yes.
Thank you, Majority Leader Powers, for your work on this project. With the support of the affected council member, we will now vote to approve LUs 18 and 19. Council, please call the roll.
Chair Lewis,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Feliz,
Good morning, I vote aye.
Councilmember De La Rosa,
Aye.
Councilmember Marte,
Aye.
Councilmember Ung,
Aye.
Minority Whip Vernikoff.
Aye.
By a vote of 6 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, the items are approved and recommended to the full Land Use Committee, and the vote will be held open for Councilmember Nurse.
Thank you. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but we're joined by Councilmember Ung. Before we move to our public hearing, I want to recognize the subcommittee council to review today's hearing procedures.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I am Jeffrey Companion, counsel to this subcommittee. Members of the public who wish to testify were asked to register for today's hearing. If you registered to testify and are not yet signed into Zoom, please sign in now and remain signed in until after you've testified. If you wish to testify and have not registered, please go to www.council.nyc.gov/landuse to sign up now. If you're not planning to testify on today's items, please watch the hearing on the New York City Council website. All people testifying before the subcommittee will be on mute until they are recognized to testify. Please confirm that your mic is unmuted before you begin speaking. Public testimony will be limited to 2 minutes per witness. If you have written testimony that you would like the subcommittee to consider in addition to or in lieu of appearing before the subcommittee, or if you require an accessible version of a presentation given at today's meeting, please email landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please indicate the LU number or project name in the subject line of the email. During the hearing, council members who would like to ask questions should use the Zoom raise hand function. The raise hand button should appear at the bottom of the participant panel. I will announce council members who have questions in the order that they raise their hands. Witnesses are reminded to remain in the meeting until they are excused by the chair. Lastly, there may be extended pauses if we encounter technical problems. We ask that you please be patient as we work through these issues. Chair Lewis will now continue with today's agenda.
Thank you. I now open the public hearing on the pre-considered LU for applications 220010 TAM. This application was submitted by Metropolitan Transit Authority pursuant to sections 12666-C of the New York State Public Authorities Law, requesting approval of the acquisition of city-owned property located at Block 1773, lots 4 and 72 in the borough of Manhattan to facilitate the northward extension of the 2nd Avenue subway and the construction of a station at 125th Street. The property is located in Council District represented by Deputy Speaker Ayala. I now recognize Deputy Speaker Ayala if she's here for remarks. She's not here? Okay. We are joined by Joe O'Donnell, Sean Fitzpatrick, and Tim, forgive me, Gia Francesco, and Robert Reckenstein from the Metropolitan Transit Authority, also known as MTA. Council, please administer the affirmation. Thank you.
Please raise your right hands and respond when I call your name. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony and in response to all council member questions? Joe O'Donnell.
I do.
Sean Fitzpatrick.
Sean's not joining us this morning.
Tim Gianfrancesco.
I do.
Robert Reichenstein.
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Your PowerPoint presentation will be posted on the screen when you're ready to request it, and you may begin at that time.
Thank you very much, Chair Lewis. And thank you all for having us here this morning to the City Council's Subcommittee on Landmarks, Public Sightings, and Disposition. As the chair referenced, we are here to speak to you this morning. We're to testify on behalf of the disposition of parcels to advance the Second Avenue subway. These are block 1773, lots 4 and 72, as the chair noted. A little bit about Second Avenue subway, and then we'll get into the specifics of the transfer. Just for identification purposes, my name is Joe O'Donnell. I am the Director of Government and Community Affairs for MTA Construction and Development. I will be presenting before you this morning. I am also joined by the Senior Vice President and Project CEO for the Second Avenue Subway Project Phase 2, Tim Gianfrancesco, who will assist in any technical information and answering of any questions, as well as Robert Rickenstein, who is the Senior Vice President of Transit-Oriented Development for MTA Construction and Development. If you could please put up the presentation. So as noted, we are here to talk to you about Second Avenue Subway Phase 2, land use action for transfer of city parcels to the MTA. Next slide. Phase 2 of the Second Avenue Subway is what we're here to speak about, but just as a primer, our Second Avenue Subway in general, as it was fully conceived in 2004, was always conceived as of 2004 as a 4-phase project. Phase 1 was completed in 2017, and that extended Q service from 63rd Street to 3 new stations at 72nd, 86th, and 96th. Phase 2 would propose to bring that Q service, which now terminates at 96th Street, up into East Harlem at 120, terminating at 125th Street, with new stations at 106 and 116th Street. Phases 3 and 4 are not yet in the works. Phase 1 serves approximately 200,000 daily riders. This was pre-COVID. That's about the same ridership as the MARTA, or Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority service, which is 205,000 riders, and more than the combined LA Metro and Baltimore ridership, which is 152,000 riders. As noted, we are here to speak to you specifically about Phase 2 today. Next slide. Phase 2 is a vital equity project for the residents of East Harlem. The 125th Street terminus is in the heart of historic Harlem and connects with the Lexington Avenue 456 and the 125th Street Metro North Station. Over 70% of the residents in this area use public transportation and get to work versus 55% citywide. East Harlem has grown by over 14% since 2010. Similarly, vitality of this service is noted in East Harlem because there are over 12% seniors, 55% Black, Hispanic, or 55% Hispanic, 33% Black, higher than the city overall average. This project was promised to the residents of East Harlem since the 2nd and 3rd Avenue Ls were removed from service in the 1940s and 1950s. It's going to increase transit equity. It's going to increase accessibility to employment opportunities outside of the immediate area. It's going to increase accessibility for workers and consumers traveling to and from East Harlem. And it's going to increase access to hospitals, special medical care on the Upper East Side. Next slide. Just to give you a sense of the area that we're talking about, this is the proposed alignment of Second Avenue Subway Phase 2. As you will see on the screen, there are stations at 106th Street, 106th Street, and then a terminal station at 125th Street. The project proposes to make use of existing tunnel work that is noted in green from 105 to 110, and then from 110 to 120. The area from 110 to 120 will be repurposed as the 116th Street station. This will help us make an adaptive reuse of the tunnel work that was started in the 1970s, but had to be abandoned due to the lack of financial capacity to complete the project. Next slide. For orientation and awareness purposes, all of the stations for Second Avenue Subway Phase 2 are configured similarly. There are ancillary structures at the north and south ends of the station on Second Avenue proper. On 125th Street, they would be on the east and west extremes of the station. And between those ancillary structures, you have entrance facilities, whether they are ADA accessible, elevator and escalator entrances or stair entrances. For those of you who are not familiar, an ancillary structure houses all of our back of the house equipment, typically ventilation systems, emergency fans, power equipment, signals, things of that nature. Next slide. Drilling down a little bit deeper, or to use an unfortunate construction metaphor, we're talking now specifically about the area that we are here to testify about today. So if you see in the red circle in just about the center of your screen, that is the 125th Street station entrance 3 and ancillary 2. The entrance and ancillary are proposed on Park Avenue between 124th and 125th Street. The ancillary facility, or that back of the house equipment, is conceived to be located closer to 124th Street, with the entrance to the station here at 125th Street with close proximity to the Metro North station, as well as the 125th Street Lex Line station. It was originally conceived that we would work on both sides of the property, of the viaduct here, in conjunction with our consultation with the developers in this area. We thought it prudent to move all of the vital equipment or vital components to the east side of the viaduct. So if you see in that circle there, all the area in blue is land that we would look to acquire. The parcel that is marked out in a square is the actual HPD or city-owned parcels that we're talking about today. And there would still be an emergency exit on the west side of the Park Avenue viaduct. Next slide. So this drills it down even a little bit further. The area hashed out in the red mark are HPD parcels, block 1773, lots 4 and 72. The surrounding area are Durst lots, and we would look to acquire those parcels as well. This is a very unique circumstance of transfer of city parcels. There was a commitment for use for transit purposes of these parcels. The sites are not suitable for other types of public uses before they are incorporated into the Second Avenue Subway project, and the transfer serves critical to the advancement of the Second Avenue Subway project. As noted, this is anticipated to be the entrance and ancillary structure for the northern or the westernmost component of the 125th Street station. Next slide. A little bit of background on the criticality of this and the nature of this agreement and where we are today. In 2016, the MTA gave city land at 126th Street for EDC's New York Proton Center development. In return for that, MTA received city commitment to deliver these HPD parcels to the MTA. In 2021, the MTA and the city agreed to pay HPD the established difference in the property values, and I believe that was in the range of $3.2 million. And then in January of 2022, the MTA board authorized that payment to HPD for this difference. To advance this further and to finalize the steps in this agreement, the deputy mayor requires a mini ULURP authorized under PAL 1266-C5 to sign and transfer the deed and receive MTA payment. On January 12th of 2022, the MTA presented this proposal, proposed transfer of property, disposition of property to Community Board 11. On March 29th, we updated Council Member Ayala, and then here we are on April 4th as part of the formal presentation to the City Council's Land Use Committee and the Subcommittee on Landmarks, Public Sightings, and Dispositions. Next slide. Just to give you a little sense, I won't go into too much detail because you can read it all on the screen, but as to where we are in the project's life cycle today and why this is important. As you know, this project has been in the works for a considerable amount of time, since it entered development in 2016. It has picked up some steam of late. Not only did we get favorable word from the FTA in the beginning of the year that we were going to be moved into the engineering phase of the project, which had been stagnated for several years. This was good news to us because it gave us the hope that this project was in fact moving forward in the FTA's process and moving towards a fully funded grant agreement, which is vital to the actual implementation of this project. Further, we were advised, and I'm sure you saw in the news of late, that $100 million was being earmarked by the federal government in this year's budget, which was another positive sign. Certainly not the fully funded grant agreement commitment that we're looking to advance this project so that we don't find ourselves in a similar situation like they did in the 1970s and we don't have the necessary funds to complete this project. But that $100 million was an earmark in the new budget, is not a guarantee, but it's certainly another step in the right direction. It gives us the confidence to advance early property acquisition, like we're speaking to you about today, and the potential for awarding a early utility work contract sometime later this summer. The goal in all of this would be to achieve a fully funded grant agreement by the end of this year. The goal is November of 2022. Next slide. The advanced work project, which I referenced, the early utility work, the design is completed on that project. There have been meetings that are ongoing with property owners and impacted individuals, whether it's residents or schools, stakeholders in the community. So those advanced meetings have been underway. As part of the lessons learned from Second Avenue Subway Phase 1, the project established a community information center very early on in this project. In fact, in 2017, well before any shovels are in the ground or work is underway, so that we are having collaborative and detailed, lengthy conversations with not only the elected officials in the East Harlem area, Community Board 11, as I mentioned, as well as Community Board 10, the stakeholders in this community and the residents at large. So we have a concerted effort to keep folks apprised of development on this project as we move forward. So we will continue to do that as this does in fact move forward. The second contract and third contract, which are the civil, structural, and design build contracts, those documents are being updated and incorporated with additional cost containment measures and based on developer coordination at 125th Street. So that has been ongoing all throughout COVID and in this quote post-COVID environment. Our mechanical engineering, electrical and plumbing systems, architectural fit out and design build contract for contract 4. Those draft documents were completed in Q1 of 2021, and the anticipation of the completion of those final documents is 2022. When I say final, those are not completed designs. Those are simply brought to a point where we can then turn it over to the design builder who will advance and complete the design once they are brought on board. The ongoing coordination with the developers at 125th Street at both Park Avenue and Lexington Avenue continues. And as you all are aware from some of the interaction with myself and my team, there's ongoing geological boring investigation, subsurface investigation work going on here. And this is largely to identify and confirm the subsurface conditions, soil, rock, etc., that we would find once we get out there and get into work. Get our work going underway so that we minimize the curveballs and challenges that we will find once we get out there. Next slide. I mentioned that we've established a presence early there in East Harlem. We have a community information center at 69 East 125th Street. It's fully staffed. My staff there is fully bilingual as well to be able to help the folks who might have, have Spanish as a first language, navigate questions and concerns about this project. Jose Carrero, who's someone who's familiar to that community, he joined us in the middle of COVID. Alex Zamudio is a holdover from phase 1. So he helped us deliver phase 1 of this project and has the institutional knowledge of lessons learned from phase 1. So those two gentlemen are my boots on the ground, for lack of a better word, up in the East Harlem area. And then obviously also I play a key role in the interaction here. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair. If there are any questions, obviously, as I mentioned, I have Tim Gianfrancesco from the project here and Robert Rickenstein from real estate. So between the three of us, we would be happy to entertain any questions you all might have.
Thank you, Joe, for your testimony. Are there any council members with questions?
Are there any council members who have questions? Please use the raise hand button now. There are no council member questions at this time.
All right, thank you. I do have a few. Joe, thank you for your testimony and for your work on this project. I know that you mentioned some components of this already, but if you can briefly discuss the scale and use of the future development, given that it is in a special 125th Street district and also subject to special zoning rules.
Tim, did you want to take that or you want me to go? I mean, essentially, and I don't know if Tim's unmuted or has the ability to unmute, but essentially, again, that parcel, we envision the acquisition of that entire east side portion between 124th Street and 125th Street. We're here specifically to talk about the HPD parcels, but we are also in conjunction to that transfer, working with the private developer and owner there to acquire the parcels in the C or U shape around the HPD parcels. The anticipation is that this would be a mixed ancillary and entrance structure for the advancement of the 2nd Avenue subway. It would be the entrance to the westernmost extreme of the 125th Street station, and it would also house closer to 124th Street, the ancillary components of the 125th Street station. And as I mentioned, the ancillary components are back of the house equipment like fans, ventilation equipment, power, signals, things of that nature. Tim, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, or even Robert, with regard to the acquisition and use.
As far as the structure goes, Joe, and what's going there, I think you hit it. The entrance would be on the open to the 125th Street side. The ancillary facilities would be closer to the 124th Street side, but they would include all of the typical facilities that we have at each of the stations, being the emergency ventilation systems, the emergency fans for evacuating smoke from the stations or the tunnels in the event of a fire inside the tunnel or in the stations, the facility power and the backup power systems, communication systems, and emergency egress for all of the for that portion of the station. All of those facilities would be part of the ancillary structure, and then of course the entrance, fully ADA accessible entrance, would be at the corner of 125th Street and Park.
I just might also note, to Chair, for the committee's understanding, as a design build project, we contemplate, and Tim's team contemplates, the use and the need, the critical elements for this station. And so the critical nature of this particular location is for that ancillary and entrance structure. Beyond that, this is a design build contract, so we would be looking heavily to the design builder once they're eventually brought on board. We do not have a design builder identified or awarded for this particular project. So once they get on board, we would be looking to them to understand how they could innovatively and effectively and efficiently design and deliver this location. So we would be looking for them for some more specificity as to the orientation. Tim would give them the guts, what we need there, for lack of a better word, that would be prescribed, but it would be up to them, or we would be leaning on them to for the design, to finalize the design.
Is the MTA open to getting someone from the BIPOC Community or MWBE for design build? Are you guys looking into that?
The design build contracts, these are federally funded contracts, so they will be following the DBE requirements. I believe the requirements on this contract are going to be between 17 and 20% DBE participation.
Perfect. And this was mentioned earlier, but can you share where you are in your outreach process with the community board, local schools and institutions that will be impacted by this project, and how you're going to incorporate their feedback into your planning process?
Sure. We, as I mentioned, we established, we had a community information center as part of Second Avenue Subway Phase 1. We established that center, the physical presence in the community, probably about halfway through the program. And one of the things that we learned from that was the only knock that we had on that community information center was, why didn't you do it sooner? So taking that lesson learned from Phase 1, we established that physical presence in the community in 2017, well before we had a shovel in the ground. Well, as I noted already, we don't have a contract, so well before we even had a contract to start work up here. So we've been there since 2017. Our community information center has entertained, prior to COVID, you know, the public engagement process is a little unique now as we emerge from COVID, but prior to COVID, we had over 10,000 visitors come through our doors at the Community Information Center. One of the things that we learned from being in the community early on was that the East Harlem community was appreciative of the fact they weren't going to, we shouldn't have sat around and wait for them to come to us for the information. It was expressed very early on, and I see Councilmember Brewer, and she was one of the ones who expressed that to us. We needed to bring that message to the community. So along with that community information center, and again, this was prior to COVID, things that are a little bit different as we emerge from the COVID fog or haze. We had pop-up centers that we created all over the East Harlem area. Typically what we would have done was we had a pop-up center at each of the corresponding station areas on the Lex line to create an awareness for how the project was going to be implemented and what the new stations would do to relieve overcrowding and the options that would be available to the folks who are using the 456 now once Second Avenue Subway is fully realized. Additionally, as I noted, we are fully engaged with the community board. We meet regularly. We meet quarterly with them at the very least at their transportation and land use committees to talk to them about developments with the project. We update the elected officials, the East Harlem elected contingent. We work with the likes of We Act and Uptown Grand Central as part of their visioning process to understand how that 125th Street Park Avenue corridor, that intersection of those two main arteries could be reimagined. I also might point out, for the benefit of the committee, as part of the MTA's transformation, the outfit or the construction arm that I have worked for over 10 years had previously been known as MTA Capital Construction. And in 2019, we were ordered by executive order to undergo a transformation, and we created in early 2020, prior to COVID, MTA Construction and Development. And what that did was it consolidated all of the construction or capital projects of all of the agencies, transit, capital, the commuter rails like MNR and LIR, bridges and tunnels, buses, etc., underneath one roof. So now, rather than having a disparate Park Avenue Viaduct project over here, a Second Avenue Subway project over here, and somebody not talking to the other, we have a much more unified and cohesive effort to move forward so that we are working collaboratively together to ensure that we are minimizing impacts on the surrounding community. So I hope that's helpful.
That was very helpful. And I know we've had this discussion before, but for the record, I know that currently this project is for transit purposes and uses, particularly for the parcels. Are you thinking, or is MTA thinking about future capital related uses for this area?
So this ancillary and entrance structure is a transit designated use for the purposes of the Second Avenue Subway. We've had conversations with several of the committee members about making sure that certainly the ground floor use of these facilities to the extent possible are not dead spaces. And that's another lesson learned that we've taken from other projects, and specifically from phase one. 125th Street is a vital and vibrant commercial corridor in East Harlem. So we want to ensure that as this design process moves forward, we're incorporating things, commercial space, et cetera, that does not create dead space in this area. And then also, you know, as this project advances, it does not preclude joint development, you know, down the road. We do not have a joint development project in place at the moment, or a developer in place, but the design that we are putting forward, or would ask that the design builder puts forward, does not preclude, would not preclude design building, joint development in the future. Sorry. Robert, I don't know, Tim, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, Joe, I think that covered it.
Thank you. If there aren't any council member questions, this panel is excused. Are there any members of the public who wish to testify on this item?
There are no members of the public who are signed up to testify for this item.
Thank you. Seeing no other members of the public wish to testify, no members of the public nor council members want to testify, ask questions for pre-considered LU item for application numbers 220010 TAM. The public hearing on these items are now closed. That concludes today's business. I want to remind you all again that if you have written testimony on today's items, you may submit it at landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please indicate the LU number or the project name in the subject heading. I would like to thank the applicants, members of the public, my colleagues, subcommittee, council, land use staff, and Sergeant at Arms for participating in today's hearing. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you all.
Thank you.